Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated. And it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long lived-in life. So take a slow breath. Let your body soften into the bed and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. Tonight, the moon is out. You may not be able to see it from where you're lying. The curtains may be drawn. The blinds may be closed. The night sky may be hidden behind walls and windows and the comfortable darkness you've created for yourself in this room. But the moon is there, just the same. It always is. It doesn't need you to see it in order to be present. It has been present every night of your life, whether you looked up or not, whether you noticed or not, whether you were too busy or too young or too distracted to pay it any attention at all. The moon has been there through every single night you have ever lived. And tonight, it is there again, hanging in the sky above your home, above your street, above this particular version of your life that you're living right now. Quiet, patient, silver, just like the hair that frames your face these days. There is something worth sitting with in that thought. The silver of the moon and the silver at your temples, both earned over time, both carrying a kind of quiet light that younger things simply don't possess yet. The moon wasn't always the color it appears tonight. When you were a child, the moon seemed almost white, blazing, enormous, full of magic and possibility and a kind of wild brightness that matched the way everything felt when you were small and the world was still entirely new. You looked at the moon then with wide eyes and open wonder. It was the biggest thing in the sky, the most mysterious, the most constant. You didn't think about what the moonlight meant. You simply felt it landing on your face and thought it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. Now the moon seems softer to you, more silver than white, more familiar than mysterious. And that shift is not a loss. It is something far more valuable than what you had before. It is the difference between being dazzled by something and truly knowing it, between being amazed and being at peace. The moon hasn't changed, but you have. And in the changing, you have come to understand it in a way your younger self never could. You know what silver means now. You've worn it long enough to understand. The first silver strand you found, you probably looked at it with something close to alarm. You held it in your fingers and turned it in the light. It seemed to come from nowhere. It seemed like an announcement. Something had changed. Something had begun. And whatever it had begun, there was no reversing it. You might have pulled it out. You might have covered it, colored over it, hidden it from photographs and mirrors and the eyes of people who might draw conclusions from it. You might have spent years in that particular kind of quiet resistance, that subtle refusal to let the silver show. Because the world had taught you, in ways both obvious and hidden, that silver was something to be managed, to be delayed, to be apologized for. The world was wrong about that. It is wrong about so many things that matter. And you've lived long enough to know it. You've lived long enough to watch the things the world declared important turn out to be shallow, and to watch the things the world told you to hide turn out to be the most real, the most honest, the most genuinely beautiful things you possessed. The silver came in slowly. A strand here, a patch near the temples, a softening at the roots. And somewhere along the way, without making a great ceremony of it, you stopped fighting. You let it grow. You let it show. Maybe you made a conscious choice. Maybe you simply ran out of energy for the battle. Maybe someone you loved looked at you and said something true that rearranged how you understood yourself. Or maybe the morning just arrived when you looked in the mirror and instead of seeing something to correct, you saw something to honor. Something that had been earned. Something that told the true story of a life actually lived. That morning changed something, and it deserved to. Think back to where your silver began. Not the physical place on your head, but the deeper beginning. The accumulated weight of experience that the silver was trying to announce. Because silver doesn't appear without reason. It appears after years, after seasons, after the kind of living that leaves marks, not just on the body, but on the soul. Your silver started growing in the years when life stopped being simple, when the decisions became real and the consequences became lasting, and the people you loved started needing things from you that required everything you had. When you understood for the first time that no one was coming to figure it all out for you, that you were the adult in the room, that the responsibility belonged to you now, all the way down to its roots. Your silver grew in during the hard seasons, the ones you don't talk about in polite conversation, the ones that reshaped you from the inside out, the losses that came too early, and the ones that came right on time, and all of them left you fundamentally altered, standing in a version of your own life that looked familiar, but felt entirely different from the life you'd been living before. Your silver grew in during the years of repair, when you had to rebuild things that had broken, when you had to forgive things that had hurt you, and some things that had hurt you so deeply you weren't sure forgiveness was even a concept that applied. When you had to make peace with outcomes you hadn't chosen. when you had to find a way to keep going that didn't require pretending the hard things hadn't happened. The silver held all of that. It absorbed every sleepless night and every weight-bearing conversation and every moment you stood in a place of grief or fear or uncertainty and chose to stay present anyway. It turned into silver. It came out of you as silver. And now it frames your face like the moonlight frames the dark sky, and there is nothing about it that should be covered or corrected or diminished. Close your eyes for a moment. Think about the very first night you can remember. Not necessarily the earliest memory of your entire childhood, but the first nighttime memory. The first time the darkness and the quiet and the particular atmosphere of being small in a bed at night made an impression clear enough to last. For some people, that first night memory is warm. Lamplight in a hallway, the sound of a parent's voice from the next room, the particular comfort of a stuffed animal pressed against your chin, and the absolute certainty that the world was good and safe and would still be there in the morning. You were held by the night in those memories. You were cradled by it. The darkness wasn't something to fear. It was something to surrender to, something that knew how to hold a small person and keep them until morning returned. For other people, the first night memory carries a different feeling. A darkness that was too big. A silence that felt less like comfort and more like absence. The particular loneliness of being awake in a house where everyone else was asleep and feeling the hours stretch out ahead like a long, unlit road. You lay there and learn something important in those early nights. You learn that the night was yours in a way that daytime never quite was. During the day, you belong to other people, to schedules and expectations and the noise of a world that constantly required your participation. But at night, in the quiet, in the dark, something else became available to you. Something private, something interior, something that couldn't be scheduled or demanded or borrowed by anyone else. Just you and your thoughts and the soft sounds of the breathing world settling in around you. You were learning even then how to be alone with yourself. And that is a skill that takes a lifetime to develop completely. Most people never develop it at all. But you were practicing it from the very beginning, lying awake in the dark, listening to the particular silence of your childhood home, learning what your own mind felt like when no one else was asking it to perform. Do you remember the first time you really looked at the moon? Not just noticed it, but looked at it, stopped and held your eyes on it, long enough for something inside you to go still. You might have been a child standing in a backyard on a summer evening. The grown-ups talking nearby, the sound of their voices, a warm murmur that meant the world was operating correctly, and you standing apart from all of it, face tilted up, looking at this impossible silver circle hanging above everything like it had been placed there just for you to find. Something happened in that moment. Something opened. You understood, without having words for it yet, that the world was larger than your life in it, that there were scales of existence that had nothing to do with your small concerns and your daily routines and the particular worries that occupied your young mind. The moon didn't care about any of those things. The moon had been there before you and would be there after you and in between. It simply showed up every night and did what it had always done. There was a strange comfort in that. The permanence of it, the utter indifference of it, which somehow felt less like coldness and more like freedom. You didn't have to matter to the moon. You could just look at it. You could just be a small human looking up and feeling the specific awe of smallness, without it meaning you were insufficient. The moon made you feel the right size, exactly as large as you were, and no apology required for any of it. You carried that feeling home with you and into bed with you, and you lay in the dark and thought about the moon still hanging out there above the roof, and you felt connected to something that had no name but felt important. That was the beginning of silver-haired thinking. Even though your hair was a different color entirely back then, it was the beginning of learning to look at the large things, the lasting things, the things that stay steady while everything else moves. Think about the years when you were young and restless and the nights were for living rather than sleeping. You were out in those nights, walking with friends through streets made different by the darkness, sitting on porches and stoops and park benches past the hour when sensible people went home, talking with people you loved about everything and nothing, the conversation looping through laughter and argument and silence, and back to laughter again, the night air against your skin, the world feeling wide open and full of every possible version of the future. The moon was there during those years too. You may not have been paying careful attention to it. You were too busy being young. You were too occupied with the urgent business of discovering who you were and what you wanted, and whether the people you loved you back, and what you were supposed to do with this life you'd been given, that felt both impossibly large and impossibly brief at the same time. But the moon was there. It was there the night you stayed out far too late and came home with your shoes in your hand, trying not to wake anyone, and it lit the path to your front door. It was there the night you sat on a hillside or a rooftop or a fire escape with someone whose name you still remember and looked out over a city spread below you like a field of lights. It was there for the first serious conversation you had with yourself about what your life was going to be, when you understood that the decisions were becoming real now, that youth, however it had felt, was not a permanent state, that you were going to have to choose things, and the things you chose were going to determine entire chapters of the life ahead. You looked up on one of those nights and saw the moon and felt something quiet and steadying land in the center of all your uncertainty. You weren't ready for what was coming. No one ever is. But the moon was there, and it had seen all of this before, and somehow that made it slightly more manageable. Do you remember the first person you loved with your whole self? Not the first person you liked or admired or were dazzled by, though those were real too. But the first time someone else became so woven into your daily existence that you couldn't quite imagine the shape of a life without them in it. The first love that rearranged your interior landscape so completely that you came out of it a different person than you went in. You spent nights thinking about that person. You lay in the dark and thought about every conversation you'd had. You replayed things they'd said. You turned their words over in your mind, looking for the meanings inside the meanings. You imagined futures. You imagined parallel lives where different choices had been made, and examined each one to see if it contained them. You were not sleeping much in those nights. Your heart was too loud, your mind too full. The world had been enlarged by loving someone, and the enlarged world was so interesting and so terrifying and so beautiful that sleep seemed like a waste of a perfectly good night. The moon shone through your window on those nights. It illuminated the ceiling you stared at while you thought about this person. It was present for every hope you held about what love might become. It was there for the nights when love was going well, and the particular joy of that kept you awake, because joy, like grief, has its own electricity that the body can't quite contain. And it was there, the moon, for the nights when love began to change, when something that had felt inevitable and permanent began to show the first hairline cracks of impermanence. When you lay awake, not from joy, but from the particular ache of a love that was beginning to ask more of you than you knew how to give, or asking you to receive more than you knew how to hold. The moon didn't judge any of it. It never does. It simply stays. It simply shines. And in the staying, it witnesses everything without requiring anything. That is its great gift. And you are older now, and you understand the value of a witness who requires nothing from you, who simply sees. The middle years came for you the way they come for everyone, quietly at first, then all at once. You blinked and the freedom of your younger years had resolved into structure, into routine, into the particular dignity and weight of a life with real shape to it. You had responsibilities that filled your days from one edge to the other, work that required your best mind, relationships that required your best heart, a home that required your best effort, children perhaps, who required everything you had and then a little more on top of that. And you gave it, and it was worth giving, and you would give it again without hesitation. But in the middle years, the nights changed. You didn't stay up looking at the moon anymore. You fell into bed exhausted and closed your eyes immediately, and the unconsciousness that followed was less sleep and more recovery. A brief interruption in the long, continuous task of keeping everything going. You weren't thinking about the large things in those years. You were managing the immediate things, the urgent things, the things that had deadlines and consequences and required your full attention right now, not eventually, not when you had more space, but right now, and every moment after that. The moon was still there, but you weren't looking up. You were looking forward at the road directly ahead, and the road required all of you. This is not a failure. This is what it looks like to be fully alive inside the middle of a life, to show up completely for the people and the responsibilities that needed you there. The moon understood. It kept its light on while you worked. It illuminated the driveway when you came home late. It kept watch over your sleeping house while you finally rested. It didn't require your attention in order to do its job. It simply did it, patient and constant and entirely without resentment. You remember specific nights from the middle of your life. The nights when a child was sick and you sat awake beside them through the small hours. A cool cloth in your hand, the television on low in the corner, the moon moving across the patch of sky you could see through the window. You weren't thinking about your own life in those nights. You were thinking about theirs, whether the fever would break, whether the morning would bring improvement, whether you were doing enough, whether you had done enough, whether the love you were pouring into the work of being a parent was actually landing somewhere it could take root. The nights when a parent aged before your eyes and you sat with the weight of that, the strange reversal of it, the child becoming the caretaker, the one who drives to appointments and fills prescriptions and tries to say the right thing in the moments when the right thing is hard to find. You sat in hospital waiting rooms at 3 a.m. under fluorescent lights that had no interest in being gentle. And you thought about how fragile everything was, how quickly the people you'd assumed were permanent could begin to feel temporary, how the things you'd always taken for granted turned out to be gifts the whole time, quietly given, and you hadn't known to say thank you loudly enough while you still could. Those nights changed you. They put a certain kind of silver in your understanding even before the silver appeared in your hair. They taught you what was real by showing you how quickly the unreal things fell away when the stakes became high enough. In the middle years, you were earning your silver, even if it hadn't arrived yet. You were becoming the person who could wear it with honesty. But something shifted, and in that movement, space started to open. Not enormous space, not suddenly, but cracks of quiet here and there, where the urgent demands relaxed briefly, and in the brief relaxation you found yourself one evening looking out a window, and there was the moon, and something in you recognized it, the way you recognize an old friend at a distance before you can see their face clearly, something in the posture, something in the particular way the light falls, and you just know. You stood at that window and you looked at the moon for the first time in years, and it looked back at you the way it always has, without surprise and without judgment, as if no time had passed at all, as if it had simply been waiting, as it had been waiting your entire life for you to have a moment to look up again. And in that looking, something that had gone quiet in you during the busy years began, very gently, to stir. Something that belonged to the version of you who had once stood in a backyard as a small child and felt the specific wonder of smallness. Something that belonged to the young person who had sat on a hillside and looked out over lights and understood that choices were becoming real. Something that had been there all along, waiting under the surface of all the doing, all the managing, all the responsible forward motion of a life being faithfully lived. That something was you, the deepest version of you, the one that thinks about the large things, the lasting things, the silver things, and it had been waiting without impatience for you to find your way back. The silver, by now, had come fully in. Not just a strand or a patch, but a settled presence, a color that had made itself at home on your head and in your reflection and in the photographs that showed you at family gatherings and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesdays that were somehow being documented as if someone already understood they would be worth remembering. The silver sat in your hair the way the moon sits in the sky, unhurried, unashamed, casting its particular light without apology and without the need for anyone's approval. And you had reached, by now, something approaching peace with it. Not every day, not in every mirror. There were still mornings, perhaps, when you saw yourself and felt a flicker of something old, the old resistance, The old wish for the hair you'd had at 30, at 25, at the age when the world told you your appearance was closest to right. But the flicker passed more quickly now, and in the space after it passed, something steadier was available, something that understood what the silver was actually saying. Not what you'd been taught it said, not what the world still sometimes implies with its youth-oriented everything, its filters and its products and its quiet insistence that aging is a problem to be solved. But what the silver actually, truly said, when you stopped performing the translation someone else had given you and listened to it directly. What it said was this: you have been here. You have done the thing. You have shown up year after year for this life that was given to you. You have loved people. You have lost people. You have built things and watched things fall apart and built again. You have made decisions in the dark without enough information and lived with the outcomes and learned from them and made better decisions later. You have carried things. You have set things down. You have held on too long to some things and let go too quickly of others, and gradually, over years and seasons, and the particular schooling of actual living experience, you have learned the difference. This is what the silver says. This is what it has always been saying. And now, finally, lying here in the dark, with the moonlight somewhere above you, you can hear it clearly. You are lying here now, in this bed, in this room, in this body that has carried you through every version of your life up until this moment. Your breath is slow. The covers are settled around you. The day has finished its demands and set you free, at least for these hours, at least for this stretch of darkness between the day that just ended and the one that hasn't started yet. And in this freedom, in this particular quality of nighttime stillness that only the silver-haired hours deliver, your mind is doing what it does now. Not racing, not cataloging anxieties, or rehearsing tomorrow's conversations, or revisiting the moments of the day that didn't go the way you hoped. It is doing something slower and richer and more meaningful than any of that. It is reflecting. It is gathering. It is quietly connecting the threads of a life that is long enough now to have visible patterns in it. Patterns you couldn't have seen from inside the early chapters. Patterns that only become clear from the vantage point of having actually lived enough of the story to see how the pieces relate to each other. This is one of the quiet gifts that no one mentions when they tell you about aging. No one mentions that the vantage point improves. No one tells you that with years comes a kind of seeing that isn't available to the young. That the long view is not just about distance, but about depth. You see deeper now, into people, into situations, into your own motivations and the motivations of the people who shaped you. You see the things that were actually important and the things that only seemed important because you were too close to them at the time to see their actual size. You see kindness you didn't recognize when it was offered. You see courage in yourself that you didn't credit at the time because you were too busy surviving to name what you were doing as brave. You see the love that was real even when it didn't last. You see the growth that came from the pain, not in a tidy way, not in a way that erases the pain, but in the honest way that acknowledges both things at once. The pain was real. The growth was also real. They are not opposites. They are companions, like silver and moonlight, both arriving at the same hour, both belonging to the same quietly beautiful kind of night. The moon outside your window knows all of this. It has been with you for every version of this. It was there when you were too young to know anything, and it is here now that you know enough to be still. It watched you learn to walk, and watched you learn to love, and watched you learn to lose, and watched you learn to keep going anyway. It illuminated every night that mattered and many that didn't seem to, and some that you've forgotten entirely, and some you will carry with you for as long as you carry anything at all. Tonight, it is doing what it has always done, shining without explanation, present without demand, offering its silver light to anyone willing to lie still long enough to receive it. And you are lying still. You are here. You are receiving it, this light that passes through whatever separates you from the sky tonight and finds its way to you anyway, the way the things that are meant for you always seem to find their way through whatever is in the way. This is where section 1 rests, not ends, rests, the same way you are resting now, in the middle of something that is still unfolding, in the pause between one thought and the next, in the quiet between one breath and the breath that follows. The moon is still out there. It has not moved on. It is above you still, shining its patient silver light over the world and asking nothing in return. The silver is still yours, settled into the strands of your hair, settled into the strands of your understanding, earned so thoroughly that nothing could take it from you now. The night is still generous with its silence. There is no urgency here. There is no clock demanding your attention, no voice calling you back to the doing of things. There is only the comfortable weight of the covers, the familiar darkness of the room, the sound of your own breathing moving slowly in and out, and the long, soft thread of this night continuing to unspool around you. Rest here. Let your body be heavy and warm where it is. Let the thoughts that move through your mind tonight settle. There is more when you are ready, still waiting to be remembered, still waiting in the moonlight, quietly, for you. You are still here. The moon is still out there. The night has not moved on without you. It is patient in the way that only darkness can be patient, in the way that only the hours between midnight and morning truly understand. There is no hurry in this space. There never was. You are the one who was always hurrying, all those years. The night was always willing to wait. It waited while you were too busy to notice it. It waited while you were moving too fast to feel it. It waited through every decade of your rushing forward life. And now here you are, finally stopped, finally still, finally lying in the dark with nothing to hurry toward. And the night is exactly where it always was. Exactly as it always was. Generous, quiet, full of a particular kind of space that the daytime never quite manages to offer. In the daytime, the world fills every available gap with noise and demand and the constant low hum of things that need doing. But here, in the deep part of the night, in the hours that belong to people who have learned how to rest inside the darkness rather than resist it, there is room to think thoughts that have no agenda, thoughts that wander where they want to wander, without being called back to anything useful. This is where you are right now, and you have earned this. Every year of your life was building toward the ability to be here, fully here, in the quiet, without needing it to be anything other than what it is. Think about the people who shaped you. Not the obvious ones. Not the ones you have already told the story of 100 times at family dinners and in the worn grooves of your own memory. Think about the quieter ones, the ones whose influence ran deep without making much noise about it. The teacher whose name you might have to search for now, but whose voice comes back to you sometimes when you are trying to make a decision. The one who looked at you across a classroom or a kitchen table or a narrow hospital corridor and saw something in you that you hadn't yet seen in yourself. They said something, or they didn't say anything at all, and the way they simply looked at you said everything you needed to hear. You were seen by that person, fully, accurately seen. And being seen like that, even once, even briefly, even by someone who passed through your life without staying long, changes something permanent in you. It installs a knowledge that can't be uninstalled. The knowledge that you are worth seeing. The knowledge that there is something in you that warrants a person stopping what they are doing and paying real attention. You carried that forward. You may not have known you were carrying it. It may have lived below the surface, invisible to you for years, but available in the moments when you needed it most. When you were standing in front of a mirror that the world had arranged to be unkind, that hidden knowledge pushed back. When someone tried to make you small, that deeply buried certainty of being worth seeing kept a part of you upright. Honor that person tonight, whoever they were. Send a quiet word of gratitude into the dark on their behalf, because they gave you something that outlasted any gift wrapped in paper. They gave you a piece of your own foundation. You have been someone's quiet influence too. You know this, even if you can't always see it clearly. You have passed through lives and left things behind, the way the moon leaves silver on still water when it crosses overhead. Not dramatic, not announced, just present and then gone, and the light remaining. There are people who carry something of you in them right now, tonight, while you lie here under these covers in the dark. People who learn something from watching you. People for whom you were the person who stopped what you were doing and really looked. Maybe you don't know who they are. Maybe you never will. The influence we have on others moves in ways we rarely get to track. A word spoken on a Tuesday afternoon that you forgot by Wednesday stayed with someone for 30 years and rearranged something important in them. A small act of patience that cost you almost nothing was witnessed by a child who filed it away as evidence that adults could be gentle. A moment of honesty in a conversation you barely remember gave someone else the permission to be honest in a conversation that changed their life. You have been doing this your whole life without knowing it, leaving light, moving on, the light remaining. This is not a small thing. This is, in fact, one of the largest things a human life can do. And you have been doing it quietly, without recognition, without ceremony, without anyone handing you an accounting of every life you touched on the way through. The accounting exists. It's just not kept in a place you can read. There is something the moonlight does that takes years to understand. It shows you the shape of things without showing you the detail. In daylight, you see everything sharply. Every flaw, every crack, every place where the paint has worn thin or the edges have gone rough with use. Daylight is honest in that way, but it is also relentless. It doesn't allow for softness. It doesn't permit ambiguity. It insists on clarity even when clarity is not what the moment requires. But moonlight is different. Moonlight gives you the shape, the outline, the essential structure of a thing, without demanding that you account for every imperfection within it. Under moonlight, the garden you have worked in for years looks the way it looked in the dream you had of it before you planted the first thing. Under moonlight, the face of someone you love looks like the face you fell in love with, the underlying structure unchanged, the years on it soft rather than harsh. Under moonlight, your own hands lying on top of the covers look like hands that have done good work. Capable hands. Hands with a history. Not old hands in the way the word old is sometimes used as a diminishment. Old hands in the way that old wood is beautiful. In the way that a well-used thing carries more value than a new thing, because the use is itself a kind of record, a proof of life. You have old hands in the best possible meaning of that word, and tonight, in the moonlight, they are beautiful. You might not see it in the daylight. That's all right. The moonlight is telling you the truth, that the daylight is sometimes too busy to mention. Let your thoughts move now toward the things you built. Not just the physical things, though those count too. The houses improved and the gardens tended and the meals made and the things repaired that might otherwise have been lost. But the intangible constructions, the things you built that have no weight and no address, but are entirely real. The relationships you built, carefully and sometimes painfully, over years of showing up and saying the difficult things and not leaving when leaving would have been easier. Friendship built across decades has a particular density to it, a particular weight that can only be accumulated through time. When you have known someone through multiple versions of yourself and they have known you through multiple versions of theirs, what exists between you is not simply friendship in the ordinary sense of the word. It is a shared archive. It is a mutual act of witnessing. It is the closest thing available to the experience of being truly known. You have friendships like this, or you have had them. People who remember things about you that you've half forgotten. People who can finish your sentences, not because they're completing your thoughts, but because they remember the original thought from decades ago and they know how it ends. People who have sat with you in hospital waiting rooms and cemetery parking lots and at kitchen tables at 2 a.m. when the thing that had to be talked about couldn't wait for a reasonable hour. Those people. Think about those people tonight. Whatever distance has grown between you, whatever time has passed, whatever changes life has made in the geography of your connection, the archive is intact. The years of witnessing are intact. That is not nothing. That is very far from nothing. Think about what you know, now that you didn't know at 40, at 30, at 25, when you were so certain about so many things that turned out to be the wrong things to be certain about. The knowledge that has come with age is different in character from the knowledge you accumulated when you were younger. When you were younger, knowledge was something you acquired deliberately. You studied it, or you sought it out, or someone handed it to you and you stored it. It had the quality of inventory, things you had gathered, things you possessed. But the knowledge that comes with genuine lived experience is not like that. It doesn't feel like possession. It feels more like recognition, like you are understanding things that were always true, that have always been true, and you are simply finally old enough to see them. The young know things, the old recognize things, and there is a vast difference between the two experiences. You have been recognizing truths for years now. Some of them are quiet and steady, the kind that settle into you without drama and simply become part of how you move through the world. Some of them arrived with force, the recognitions that came from loss or failure, or the specific education of watching something you believed in turn out to be more complicated than you'd allowed. All of them belong to you. All of them are part of the particular intelligence that a life your length carries in it, that no amount of study or cleverness or raw talent can substitute for. You have the intelligence of years. And tonight, in this room, in this quiet, it is fully available to you. You think about regret. It would be dishonest not to. In the silver hours, the mind goes where the mind goes, and sometimes it goes to the places of regret, the things left unsaid that should have been said. The apologies that came too late or not at all. The moments when you were given a choice between courage and comfort, and you chose comfort, and you have known ever since what that cost. The relationships that drifted because you were too occupied with the immediate to tend the longer term. The opportunities that came and went while you were busy being afraid of them. Regret is real. You don't have to pretend it isn't. You don't have to perform a kind of silver-haired serenity that papers over the genuine texture of a life that included wrong turns and missed chances and moments of smallness you wish you could revise. You don't need to be serene about everything. You need only to be honest. And the honest truth about regret, the truth you've learned over years of living alongside it, is that it changes shape as you age. The regrets you carried at 40 had sharp edges. They could cut you. You could reach for them in the dark and feel them slice. But regret, that has been carried long enough, becomes something else. It wears smooth over time, the way stones wear smooth in a riverbed. It is still there. It is still heavy. But its power to wound diminishes. And what remains is something closer to understanding. A knowledge of where you went wrong that is now more useful than it is painful. A map of your own character, drawn in the places where it failed, which is also a map of where your character found its actual shape, found its true dimensions through the experience of falling short and having to reckon with that. Even your regrets have been making you. Even the wrong turns taught the road. Think about the seasons of your life, the way you think about the actual seasons. The way spring never arrives the same way twice. The way there are warm Octobers and cold Mays, and the years when summer lasted so long, it seemed like it might forget to end. and the years when winter arrived before you were ready for it and settled in and made itself so comfortable, you began to wonder if warmth was something you had only imagined. Your life has had seasons like that, long summers where everything opened and the light seemed endless and the days were so full of good things that you actually worried sometimes about losing any of it, about whether you were holding it right, whether your grip was too tight or too loose, whether joy of that caliber could be trusted to stay. And then the winters, the seasons when the light failed and the warmth went underground and you stood in the frozen middle of something difficult and tried to remember, tried to believe with your whole body that this was not permanent, that seasons change, that every winter in the history of the world has been followed by something else. You believed it because you had to. You believed it because not believing it was not a survivable option. And you were right. The springs came. They always came. Maybe not on the schedule you wanted. Maybe not looking exactly the way you'd imagined spring would look when you were lying in the middle of winter imagining it. But they came. They came, and the light came back, and something in you that had gone dormant stirred and opened and turned its face toward the warmth, the way living things do, because that's what living things do. They turn toward the warmth. They find the light. They keep growing even when they have to grow sideways to do it, even when the growing doesn't look like growing from the outside. You have been a living thing through all of your seasons. You have turned toward the light more times than you can count. And here you are in this season, which has its own particular beauty that none of the other seasons could have offered. The beauty of a winter sky that has gone clear and dark and full of stars. The beauty of silver. The beauty of knowing, finally, that you have survived every previous winter and you are still here, and the knowing is a warmth all its own. Consider for a moment the particular gift of being someone the young people in your life come to with their questions. If they come to you, they come because something in them recognizes what you carry. They might not be able to name it. They might not have the vocabulary for it yet, because vocabulary of this kind is earned rather than taught. But they can feel it, the density of experience, the particular quality of attention that someone brings to a problem when they have lived long enough to have encountered several versions of it before. When a young person sits down across from you and describes their crisis, whatever it is, the new crisis that feels to them like the first of its kind, unprecedented, without historical precedent, you feel something settle in you, a recognition, because you have been in that room before. Not the exact room, not the exact crisis, but close enough. You have been in the room where everything feels uncertain and the future looks illegible and the ground beneath your feet has stopped feeling solid. You were there once, more than once, and you found your way through, not around, through. And the way through always left you knowing something you hadn't known before. You are a library of ways through. You are a collection of survivals. When you speak to someone younger from that place, from the place of genuine earned understanding, you are offering them something that cannot be manufactured or purchased or acquired any other way. You are offering them evidence. Evidence that it is possible to be standing on the other side of what they are currently in the middle of. Evidence that the middle is survivable. Evidence that the person on the other side of it, the person who has been through it, can still be someone with warmth in them and humor and the capacity for joy. This is not a small offering. In the right moment, given to the right person, this is the most important thing in the world. There is a particular conversation that happens in the mind of someone who has lived long enough to watch the people they love age alongside them. It is the conversation about what remains, not what is lost. Though loss is present, always present, in the silver years, but what remains? What is left after all the things that change have changed? After the bodies have become less reliable, after the hair has gone silver, and the sleep has become lighter, and the world has begun to look more clearly finite than it ever looked before. What remains is the most durable version of who you are. You have been shedding the temporary parts of yourself for decades now, sometimes willingly and sometimes in grief, but continuously, the way a tree sheds leaves that were never meant to be permanent. What remains is the heartwood, the center that doesn't come off when circumstances change. The you that is still recognizably you, whether you are 25 or 55 or standing somewhere well beyond both. You know what that center is made of now. You couldn't have told anyone at 30, not with any real accuracy, what the core of your character was constructed from. You were still too surrounded by the temporary layers to see the permanent one, but the years have done their work, and now you can feel it in quiet moments like this one. The specific density of who you really are, what you are made of, at the bottom of all the made-up parts. It is enough. It has always been enough. More than enough, actually, though you were a long time learning to believe that. You think about the people you've lost. They are present tonight in a way that the living sometimes aren't. Loss has a way of clarifying people, of distilling them down to their essence and holding them there, unchanging, in a way that living people can't hold themselves. The living keep changing, keep growing, keep becoming something new, which is right and good, but also means you can never fully possess them. They keep slipping the frame. But those you've lost are held steady now. They exist in the form in which they most essentially were. And you can visit them on nights like this one, in the particular intimacy that grief eventually opens into once the sharpest pain has passed. Not the grief of early loss, which is all cutting and disorientation and the physical sensation of an absence where a presence used to be, but the grief of years later, which is quieter and stranger and more complex. The grief that knows how to hold a person and miss them and love them and continue being alive all at the same time, without any of those things cancelling the others out. You know this grief. You carry it with the particular competence of someone who has learned, over years of practice, how to carry weight without letting it stop you. They are with you tonight. The people you have loved and lost, they have followed you into this hour, and they are here in the room with you, present in the way that loved people always remain present, in the ways you speak and the things you value and the particular quality of attention you bring to the world, shaped as it was by the time you spent in their company. You carry them forward. You always have. You always will. The moon moves across the sky while you rest. You cannot see it happening from here, but it is happening. The slow, patient arc of it. The same arc it has traced every night since before there was anyone to watch it trace it. The moon does not require observers. It simply moves. It simply shines. And somehow, in its very indifference to whether anyone is watching, it becomes more comforting rather than less, because it doesn't need you to sustain it. It doesn't need your attention or your understanding or your gratitude. It is complete without any of that. It will be there tomorrow night when you look up, if you look up, and it will be there on the nights you don't. This is what permanence looks like. Not the permanence of things that don't change, because nothing doesn't change, but the permanence of things that continue, regardless of whether you are watching. The river, the mountain, the turning seasons, the moon in its arc across the night sky. You have been part of the permanent things far longer than you sometimes remember. You have been here through seasons and years and decades. You have watched the world change around you and changed along with it, and yet you have remained persistently and unmistakably yourself. This is its own kind of permanence. This is its own kind of staying. The self that has lived inside your life through all its versions is as durable as anything, more durable than most things. And tonight, under the silent sky, under the silver light of the moving moon, that self is at rest, not absent, not diminished, simply resting the way permanent things can afford to rest, knowing they will still be there when morning comes. There is something you have not said out loud that you know to be true. You know it with the particular certainty that comes from decades of living long enough to test your understanding against reality and find it holding. You know it the way the body knows things, in the place below words, in the deep interior where the truest things settle. And what you know is this: your life has mattered, not in the headline sense, not in the way that gets measured in formal recognition, or large gestures, or the kind of impact that writes itself into records, but in the real sense, in the sense that cannot be falsified, the sense that lives in the specific ways the world is different because you were in it. The people who are better for having known you, the small moments of kindness that rippled forward in ways you'll never track, the example you set on ordinary days of how to live with integrity inside the life that keeps throwing complications at you, the love you gave, imperfect and real and sustained across decades through all the difficulty that sustaining love across decades requires. These things are not small. They are not measurable in the ways that public achievements are measured, but they are far more lasting and far more true. They are the actual substance of what a human life is made of when you strip away the performance and look at what's really there. Your life, when you strip away the performance and look at what's really there, is full of this substance, full of real weight, real consequence, real meaning given and received and passed forward. You are allowed to know this tonight. You are allowed to believe it without waiting for someone else to confirm it. The silver at your temples has been confirming it for years. You just now finally Have the quiet to hear what it's been saying. You think about the sounds that have meant home to you over the years. Not the dramatic sounds, not the sounds that announce themselves as significant. The small ones, the background ones, the sounds you didn't know you were registering until you were somewhere else and their absence made itself felt. The particular creak of a floorboard in a house you lived in once, that you haven't lived in for decades, but whose sound lives in your body still. So complete is the archive your nervous system keeps of every place that ever held you. The rhythm of a specific person's breathing beside you in sleep. The way rain fell on a particular kind of roof, a particular kind of window, in a particular time of your life that you return to sometimes in the way you return to music, not because it was perfect, but because it was real and it was yours, and it made a sound that nothing since has quite replicated. The voices of people who are gone now. You can still hear them if you are quiet enough. Not always, not reliably, but sometimes, in the deep part of a night like this one, a voice comes back so clearly that it startles you with its precision, the exact timbre of it, the specific way they said your name. You didn't know, back when you heard it every day, that you were memorizing it. You didn't know the ordinary sounds of an ordinary life were being archived somewhere permanent in you, but they were. And when they come back in the quiet, they are a gift, a return, a small, private, impossible reunion with something that seemed entirely gone. You receive it without question. You hold it for the moment it stays. You let it go when it goes. And you carry forward the warmth of having been visited, here in the dark, by a sound that loves you still. The room around you is still. The night is doing what it does best, which is hold. The darkness holds the walls and everything within them. The silence holds the sounds that the day makes when it is busy being the day. The covers hold your body with their familiar weight. The bed holds you entire, steadily and without condition. The way the best kinds of holding always work. And underneath all of that holding, something else. The long holding of a life that has been faithfully carrying you forward. Season after season, from the very first moment you arrived in it, all the way to this one. The accumulated holding of every night you've survived, and every morning you've been given, and every hard season, and every good one, and every version of yourself that has found its way, somehow, to this particular night. You are held right now by more than the mattress and the soft blankets beneath you. You are held by all of it, by the whole of it, by the full weight and warmth of a life that chose you as the place it would happen. You don't have to hold everything tonight. You can set it down. The years of carrying can be briefly put aside. The vigilance can rest. The management and the forward motion and the keeping of everything together can pause for these hours, this night, this stretch of silver and quiet and honest dark. You have earned rest of a kind that goes deeper than sleep. You have earned the rest of a mind that has finally, after a long and worthy journey, arrived at something like peace with its own story. Not finished with the story, not resigned to it, but genuinely, solidly at peace with having lived it, with being the person who lived it, with being right here, right now, exactly who you are. Let your breath slow now. One breath, then another. Each breath a small moment of trust in the body you have carried through everything, the body that has carried you through everything, the partnership between you and your physical self that has been ongoing since the very beginning, and it continues tonight in the quiet and the dark. Feel the weight of your limbs. Feel the particular heaviness that comes when the body finally understands that it is safe to release what it has been holding. The shoulders can drop, the hands can open, the jaw, which holds so much without being asked, can soften. You don't have to grip anything tonight. There is nothing to grip. There is only this, the room, the darkness, the distant silver eye of the moon, moving in its ancient arc, the covers, the warmth, the slow and deepening quiet of a night moving toward its deepest point. And you, silver-haired and still and finally resting in the full meaning of that word. You have thought the thoughts that needed thinking tonight. You have followed the memory where it needed to go. You have honored the people who shaped you and the years that made you and the silver that tells the truth about all of it. You have been honest with yourself in the dark, which is the most honest a person can ever be. And now, the thinking can gentle down, the way a fire gentles down after the longest part of the night. Still present, still warm, but lower now, quieter, ready to rest in its own embers until morning asks it to wake again. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.